So again, my points of investigation begin concerning the question of the items taken from my property in early 2010 after my employment with Capital Chemist Group terminated, whether the contents of that bag were merely isolated and separately looked into, or collectively story woven around them looked into, if they were placed somewhere offensive, if they were mixed with additional content placed somewhere offensive.
No, but you can stop helping this deer. I shot it before these two hit it with their car. I followed them when they hauled it off. This deer belongs to me.
What's daring about Roger Toll is that you would think, well, and it's what got me going on the psychopathy blind, like the woman who drowns her kids in the bathtub, and then not feeling that she had any onus to discuss the act as a wrong in a courtroom until getting a multitude of questions, because he leaves the imprint on your mind back when you're working for his company in a mindfuck of a way, which is, as I've said, he seems to judge art by the question, is its content morally prescriptive? And then that he would hope that the theme for the conference Lake Krakenback Resort Retreat for the whole staff would be how to host a murder, and that he additionally states our art to be a waste of time. Like he'd asked me at one Lake Krakenback Resort conference one year what had I been up to, and at the time I was a friend had acquainted me to the Black Book series with Tamsin Greig, Dylan Moran, and Bill Bailey, and so I'd mentioned that I'd been watching that, and he said, isn't that a waste of time? Words to that effect of, well, that's a waste of time. And then he also made the statement, you need more meat on your bones, Luke. Okay. But so if he leaves you with the view that art is representative of a person's prescriptive morals, and then you have Gary singing "Hey Jude" to his wife Judith, when it seems Jude was a boy, and that the song was encouraging him. The lyrics of the song seem to have been encouraging a boy named Jude in his future endeavors with women. Then in the Marilyn Manson interview where he does describe a photo of the band Kiss, as he says these are 4 gay dudes. And then, yeah, another mind I admire has come forward saying that they are opined to describe Kiss as a gay band. So
Hey Rick, it's Rick. Listen, sorry about earlier. No hard feelings.
yeah, so if his wife were a male, in his biphobic company, It makes it hard to imagine why Roger Toller and Gary Cairns would run a biphobic company if Gary Cairns thought that a song addressed to a male named Jude was suitable to sing in front of everyone at the company and at the conference that year, because in doing so he's either saying like, well, don't be shy around my wife Judy, she may look like a woman, but she's a man, she's a boy on the inside. So can you all be more PC? Or he'd be saying, by way of his modeling, that he'd be about the Freemasonry equivalent of over the hill, or that if using the privatized security and surveillance tech to spy in on their own chicks and their own wives, so they can try and think of and prepare for an after work, how was your day, honey conversation that increases the odds of winding up fucking. And Roger and Gary were turning and talking to one another along the way, saying, yeah, definitely say this to her later, like that'll get her wet for sure. And they were having conversations like that, then that might explain why he would slip, and it may not occur to him. If he'd spent more time talking to Roger about his plans for outside of their privatized research whereabouts, to having surveyed their wives, get them mentally lubed up and fuck them and what to say, and maybe they'd practice conversations on one another. That all lines up quite nicely with why then at a conference he would think of singing "Hey Jude" as a romantic song after a few drinks. I suppose that is the more probable count of the two. Because, like, well, I didn't even read these fucking lyrics, but what outweighs the check of that, to my mind, would be like jock talk, you know.
What if I told you there's a huge ticket up right behind you? You really think I'm not stupid?
I'm taking. I've already asked. I haven't asked Susie to the prom yet, but she's bound to say yes to me instead of Bravith from Sol Patterson chemist. You know. So. And yeah, seeing both of their wives in passing and from time to time, they did look to me like I wouldn't say distressed, but it just always more of a chilled though, and Roger's nickname Roger the Dodger, and him known for being a bit of a dodgy cunt. And so yeah, then when he gets the whole company to play How to Host a Murder, it was this sense of it was their missionary statement reading a bit too much like a church foyer, and a bit too distanced and detached from following on from the pharmacist's code of ethics. Pharmacist's code of ethics sounded professional. It sounded like something you would be thankful to read in a pharmacy. And you can have a sense of pride, but then the mission statement
I'm not gonna last all night.
I need 5 minutes.
The mission statement and their admission that Christianity is paranoia, and this detraction from admiration for Christianity, that sufficient that they call it a mental illness. It would make me think that they would be inclined to be deterred from, if they were going to pick a cancer, like they would collect monetary donations in a tin for something like the Cancer Council, and not the Eden Monero Cancer Support Group, because the term Eden would have been a... does this remind you of the Christian story, Deterrent? You know why, when there were that many cancer support groups around, and then of course they don't link mental deteriorations with radios, and there's nothing to do with cancer or radiology in Eden Monero.
Where's your collar? I'll fix it. I dropped it.
They were all completely not. They were written by different species. In fact, the UFOs that helped make the pyramids pass these secrets onto the first Freemasons, who they used to do a lot of cocaine with back then, and one of them was the great so many times grandparents of Gary Cairns, and a time traveler, and getting stoned became the term for smoking weed because of them, because UFO stories are always going to be more plausible. People would prefer UFO stories and did the UFO. If the UFOs made the pyramids and the Sphinx, then it was Gary Cairns' ancestors who traveled back in time with copies of music by the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and it was so impressive to the ancient Babylonians and Egyptians that it was the next impressive thing from these aliens' ability to turn themselves into stone and back. So while in the form of moving stone, like on Labyrinth, or anyway, they do a lot of cocaine, and then that's why the nose fell off some of the statues of Sphinx, from snorting too much cocaine in the Babylonian years. Yeah, in a way, they're unified theists in a way, and theologians, because their theories on how knowledge works are the same, to the point where you could almost say, well, it is like going to a football match, and your religions, they'll wear. Someone made a joke about it. I think if maybe all religious problems would get solved if people just wore different colored hats, something like that. But yeah, when the theme interviews with people from, I didn't attend on that year because of the way that I'd heard Roger Toll speak about art, and I was a little shaken from Gary Cairns' serenading his wife with "Hey Jude" by the Beatles. Sounded like he wanted to suck her dick, his dick, and then wish her luck finding a girl, which is atypical for a husband to a wife.
Jesus, Jerry, what the hell are you doing here?
What are you talking about? We agreed a boy's father should be present when he's learning to drive.
I was once told not to keep old newspapers by Peter Holder at the Hughes Chemist.
Coming along for an adventure.
Uh,
This is where we're going? Nope. This is.
but I had done so anyway, where it was important to me. Though there's one case. Well, there's two cases of newspaper robbings from me. One is if the next time I go and Google the article about my early childhood, is it still identifiable online? Because for a time I was unable to access it through Google searches from the article's headline, which had always been enough to find it in past years. The second one is the newspaper that was the means by which I learned of a friend's disappearance, which I had kept ever since. And that was amongst the items stolen from 70 Melba Street, Downer.
Couldn't be safer. Hey, Morty, hang on to this. That number's your dad. If you lose it, we're not gonna be able to get it back. Don't come with. It's boring.
So yeah, the question, what do you do if you have an informal, like, I've heard the distinction being made between the law and the spirit of the law, which would be like, if common sense can tell you, and you've demonstrated eloquently in conversation that you comprehend an agreement or an idea well enough, where certain statements or instructions or advice begs further questioning, but you're yelled at if you question to the point that you must cease questioning. And one of those statements is included amongst those statements is don't keep old newspapers. But what you want to say is, well, what if I feel the most responsible thing for me to do with that newspaper is to keep it. But you've learnt from expressing a contrary opinion of view that you will be yelled at. Then that doesn't mean you go and throw your newspaper out. They have a collection service that's even more impressive and invading than presenting an Eden Monero Cancer Support Group collection tin is pretentious, given their beliefs and research expeditions, shall we say.
Had we caught it sooner. Well, hindsight is 20/20, Roy. What's important is that we move quickly.
I'm not ready to die.
You're not going to.
So, yeah, with some of this crazy talk about, so the symptoms, they're people hearing voices, and the symptoms are then being studied, and like that, a quick reversal, I think I've discussed this even before, is to turn that around and say, well, how insensitive is that to the mentally ill? The question I posed specifically is, how is it an empirical or scientific statement without the direct empirical measurements of the voices said to be in a person's head? And how is it therefore a scientific claim or a scientific statement on that basis? And saying the technology hasn't been invented yet.
It's also the same as doing nothing. It's combined
You know, that not only is
You and me, Morty. I never go back to the carpet store.
technology is increasing in its complexity and capabilities at an exponential rate, and the rate at which technology is increasing is also increasing at an exponential rate. And Einstein and Bohr were having these discussions in the 1950s about technology based on their ideas, which were deviating away from Einstein's to Bohr's as he was began winning debates. But I was watching for the first time in a new way the good old Batman Forever, which is where the Riddler has this ability to devise an entertainment device where imagery is broadcast into the mind of the person directly, rather than to have to sit at it in front of a television set. And Bruce Wayne's question is, well, if you can introduce imagery into the mind, what's to stop you from removing imagery back out of the mind? And Enigma says, well, played by Jim Carrey, says, don't you wish you thought of it first, Brucey? Back to Bruce Wayne. There's also that statement I said I like, that it became called the Prime Directive in Star Trek, though they elaborate on it a bit more in the newest Star Trek, which is really set. It's called Discovery, and it's set at approximately the same time as the original series. Like, one of the main characters is the brother of Spock, so it's back at that point. So well before Picard or Cisco or Janeway, and their prime directive was that they were never to. A movie's made about it called Insurrection, which seems to be like an expanding on an episode called Who Watches the Watchers, which concerned how Federation ships are to deal with what they call pre-warp civilizations, which are developing alien cultures that haven't yet worked out the science involved in making ships that are capable of light speed, at least, travel. So their policy is that if they find spaceships that are capable of light speed travel, then Federation policy permits them to make an introduction and to greet that civilization or a representative of that civilization. In the film Insurrection, they're using hologram projectors to set up research areas inside of rocks, like giant rocks. So to the native culture, they see what they just think is a rock, a giant, large rock. They can lean against it, but inside it is a whole research station of Federation scientists studying their culture. And the way they restate the ethic in Discovery is that any sufficiently advanced technology will be indistinguishable from God. And that was the way that they voiced it in. So then this extends to the question, would a mind like mine ever suggest that all these people who are hearing voices, once again, I bring it back to where is it a scientific. There's two ways for me to address this, and there's what I was taught, and then there was the theoretic question: how is it a scientific statement? Aside from they're observed to have said that they have heard voices as a matter of hearsay or verbal report to another person. So to the charge, like, I don't think I could be like, I mean, it's a religious thing to then think of me to be one person to go around talking to people saying, do you hear voices, yes or no? And if they say yes, go, oh no, you don't really, or no, you've been studied. I'm only talking about what I've been taught and also theoretics. And so it's more like, well, if you've got 9 people who are registered to have reported that they are distressed, disturbed, hear voices, are seeking mental health help, are receiving it, are happy with the therapies, are content, and so on and so forth, then that's just like, I would no more stop if you had an infected toe. I wouldn't say, oh, don't get those antibiotics, you know, like our ancestors had to climb down from trees and they had much worse than toe infections. They had they didn't have Freemasons yet, but they had all sorts of infections. And so so it would more in that event be that the if 1 out of 10 of them had radio broadcast into their heads and were being studied, then the party running that study would be using the other 9 from the 10 as decoy or fodder, unbeknownst to them, and anyone without empirical equipment wouldn't know how to tell the difference between any one of the whole lot of 10 of them. So,
You even know my real name?
yeah.
I belong to an entire species.
But you know, if you're looking at things, other factors like damage over time to eardrums, aeration of the inner ear cavities, compromisation of bilateral, how do I describe it? Bilateral aeration of the inner ear cavities. This can be related to studies, the effects of study. As data has passed from a research station to a researcher, and then another line of questioning, interrogative questioning, has been relayed back into the person's head. Energy matter is constantly being, like, the person is like a long life battery with a slow timer drainage. So you've got to think of the terms in which you frame an issue and go, you know, how absurd to go around and say that you know, everyone with the name Trixamenacenia has a made up or invented illness. I'm saying it's like, you think of military techniques where there's a person inserted, or on 21 Jump Street where those 2 guys have to pretend that they're drug dealers so they can meet the drug dealers at the top of the distribution of the drugs. Now, they even are users for a time there of the same drug that their assignment is to identify and get the dealers of. So no, it isn't the correct terms to say, you know, a religious idiot out saying mental disorders aren't real. It's just saying, if you could invent one, how would society differentiate it from And yeah, with the private sector,
What do you want?
Freemasonic disrepute for Christianity, and it's used as a pejorative. It's the way poofters think, in to cite the idealism of both the founders of the business, and how they are in terms of, you know, I say they have an investigative method of detecting dangerous or potentially dangerous. Because how convenient that I could be like, I could say, well, we have medicines that can serve a preventative role. Like, while you may not have infringed anyone's rights and believed strongly in the, okay, you're not the biggest advocate of the religious right, and you will argue with them about basically anything, but the rights to life, health, movement, and expression, you think and have consistently held to be more sacred than freedom of religion for consistently since the age of 12, as I have.
Fine, Morty, take your fart to his hole and say your goodbyes.
Then
Fuel and take a big fat Morty. That's my new word for shit because of today's events.
Here it is. This should take me back to my kind.
I'm gonna miss you, Fart. I'm really sorry your name became Fart.
I will be back soon.
yeah.
Really?
Then going from what I know of how, and the sickest thing about, like, I truly think of it as sicker than Hannibal Lecter, because, you know, Hannibal Lecter's character's got that soft spot for Clarice. I like the villains that own up to what they are and are intellectuals. I just like these basic four rights, largely because I try to look for people I can work with on various types of art projects, and finding such persons is harder than you would think, I find, here in Canberra. So yeah, there's an Ali G episode on art that's documentarial, mockumentarial on art, and, you know, there's been the piss Christ, there's been a person nailing a banana to a A4 piece of paper and selling it as art, but it's not what I call art, and it's not what it's not commonsensical to my understanding of art, or the Virgin Mary in a cheese sandwich, or yeah, Jesus silhouette in a piece of toast. I don't consider that. Out of all of that, the piss Christ is the most interesting, but, and as well as interpretations by its creator, and the juxtaposition of that verse, the way a Christian can try and take it and say, well, but don't you see, Jesus died in our sins, in our piss. So yeah, I do see that if you haven't read a single scholastic commentary on the New Testament since the 1800s. I do see how you took a golden shower on Jesus. Even my sarcasm is beginning to get a little flat. Yeah, so I'm talking about it being very akin to how you would place an undercover spy. Like it working like that, not, you know, that's why I use this term causal pluralism or causalism, and not, otherwise you could say, you know, I saw a schizophrenic with a pink shirt on, therefore all schizophrenics wear pink shirts. This is about how certain technologies, and it's only been in Star Trek, to my knowledge, that I mean, if the UN had certain discussions saying don't use certain technology, ban it completely. Those were the dilemmas that the magnitude of the dilemmas Einstein and Bohr were concerned with, but then they're already getting called old and dead. Whereas I'm calling Gary Cairns a man who tries to look like Robert D. Costello, the runner, except with a koala fucked his two front buck teeth. And I go, yeah, love. You know, and so these would be exploiters of a state of affairs, not, and so this is how they would cover their assets, with isolating critics and saying, well, this is how this critic is been so disrespectful to the poor mentally ill, who we work hard to provide medicines to.
Those two ding dongs seem pretty calm about the whole thing.
And so I don't have all the answers to my own most perplexing mysteries either. You know, with the United Kingdom subdividing into, algebra traces back etymologically to an Islamic mathematician, Al-Jabra something, and he invented algebra, and now there's Sharia law courts in the UK. So supposing quantum sensitive tech was the state of affairs in the UK, now allows for quantum sensitive tech to be made there without either getting caught out or and then shipment of these sorts of resources to Australia. Then theoretically this could be done without the United Kingdom knowing, the Queen's forces knowing, or the army here knowing. We're more sensitive to Doppler radar technology in possession of any of the other parties.
What's he gonna do? Crash rent-free at his other family's house?
What's that supposed to mean?
Your dad gets to walk all